Welcome to the College of Education and Integrative Studies podcast series. I'm Jeff Pass, Dean of the College at Cal Poly Pomona, and we have two guests with us. We have Dr. Joanne Van Boxtel from the Department of Education. Welcome, Joanne.
Thank you.
And we have a freshman student from Walnut, California, Allison Greene. Welcome, Allison.
Thank you so much.
We're here to discuss the ITEP program. Dr. Van Boxtel, what is ITEP?
ITEP is an acronym that stands for Integrated Teacher Education Preparation. So our ITEP program is a combined bachelor's and credential program. Students can get their bachelor's in liberal studies or early childhood studies and their preliminary education specialist teaching credential in 4 years.
And that's in contrast to the way it used to be, which was what?
The standard way would be to get your bachelor's degree and be admitted to our traditional program as a post-bac candidate. And that program could take anywhere from a year to maybe 2 or 3, depending on your full-time or part-time status.
So if you wanted to be a special education teacher, you would do 4 years of undergraduate study and then you would enter a credentials program.
Correct.
But now we have this new program called ITEP. And why do we have it? What was the impetus for creating such a program?
Our program was developed through grant funding that came from the Commission on Teacher Credentialing, and it was funding geared towards teacher shortage areas. We're having a national teacher shortage, regional teacher shortage, and some of the main areas include the STEM fields and special education. So this was an opportunity for us to address the teacher shortage by creating a program that can get students into the field in a much quicker and more cost-effective manner.
And why is there a shortage? I know it's complicated. There's lots of variables that contribute to a teacher shortage, and it's not a teacher shortage in every area. But why in special education is there a distinct need?
I think there are probably a number of factors at play. One of our issues is ensuring that teachers who go into the field actually stay in the field, so we do have some problems with attrition. I think historically, I know even when I was going through my own credential program, the field of special education just tends not to attract as many candidates as the standard, general education, elementary, secondary education.
Is it hard? Is it hard to be a teacher for children with disabilities?
I think it has its challenges, but it also has its benefits, just like any other teaching assignment. So our real emphasis with the ITEP program is to attract students and kind of educate them through our outreach about this program, educate them about some of the unique benefits to going into the field, especially with inclusive education being a real push within our state right now. Special education teachers going into the field now will be prepared to work collaboratively through co-teaching with general education teachers or through consultation. So looking at students more holistically and meeting needs of all students with your colleagues, with your general education and special education colleagues.
So this program not only gets the students out more quickly, but it prepares them for the long term, and it provides a model for working with regular classroom teachers so that the special educators are more likely to stay in the profession and not be overwhelmed or stressed out.
Right. In some of the settings where students are pulled out of the gen ed setting and maybe taught in what would be known as a special day class, our special education teachers can be somewhat isolated from their colleagues, and I think that's another added piece with collaboration and inclusion is not only making sure that students feel a part of the school community, but that all of our teachers feel a part of the school community.
So somebody who's listening to this and thinking about becoming a teacher of special education might have to rethink some of their assumptions about what it is that person does, because the folks we're preparing are not fitting into the model that might have been in existence when these young people were going to school.
That's right. That's right.
Right. And we're fortunate to have a student present who actually has entered the program. Allison, why did you choose special education as your career, potential career?
Well, I chose to go into this field because the community is amazing. And I also feel like they're segregated in a way. The community in schools, they are always separated. And so I chose special education teaching because I want to combine general education classes, which are for students without disabilities, and special education classes, which are for students with disabilities, and hopefully integrate them so schools can be more inclusive.
And why is that important to you?
Well, it's important because people with special needs have the same basic human needs that we all have. We all need love. We all need friends. We all need like affection, and so usually when they're segregated, they don't have as many opportunities to make friends with the rest of the student body, like general education students can, and so they're kind of segregated in a way, and so this is very, very important because they're students too, and they deserve to have the same experience other students get to have.
So was there something in your life that propelled you in this direction?
Yeah, actually, it happened when I was very small. I was at the playground, and my mom took me to the park, and there was this little girl, and she had I think she had Down syndrome, and I went over. I was playing in the area, and then I came back to my mom and I asked, like, Mom, like what's wrong with her? Like, why does she look like that? My mom explained to me, like, oh no, there's nothing wrong with her. Like, she's just like you and I, but there's something in her brain that's a little bit different. And she said, go introduce your name, go introduce yourself, and go play with her. And so I was like, okay, so that's what I did. And we played for hours, and it just took that little bit from my mom to push me to say we're all the same. You know, she thinks like you and I, she has a like she has parents like you and I, so like we're all the same. And so I think she planted the seed when I was very young, and so that gave me kind of a passion to share that this community is just like you and I.
Mm-hmm. So Dr. Van Boxtel, we want to recruit students like Allison to come to Cal Poly Pomona and enroll in our ITEP program. How do you go about doing this outreach?
One of the ways actually that we recruited Allison, we had a celebration of teaching event here at Cal Poly about a year ago to this month, and that was an event highlighting all of the benefits as well as some of the challenges of teaching. And in this event, we invited students through a nomination process, potential students through a nominations process. Allison was a student who was nominated to come to that event, and I think she's one of our success stories from the celebration event.
Yes. So a teacher nominated Allison. You knew which teacher it was?
Yes.
And how did you find out about the celebration of teaching?
Oh, well, he nominated me, and then I visit his classroom quite often because that's where a lot of the special education students are, and I'm very close to them at my school. And so one day he said, "Oh, there's this program. I really, really want you to apply." So he gave me the nomination first to check out the program, and that's when I was able to attend that event.
And what was the event like? What happened there?
At the event, they told stories of teaching and their own personal experiences, and we got to meet the staff. That was the first time I had met Dr. Van Boxtel, and so I got to kind of see the teachers I would be having and the community I'd be around, and it was very welcoming. And I'm very like picky about who I surround myself with, and so I was like, this is a great group of people to to go into and to surround myself. So that's how it helped make my decision.
And what were, as you understood it, the benefits of entering ITEP as opposed to some other program at some other institution?
Yeah, so ITEP, it's 5 years of schooling in 4, and I think the big part was meeting the professors, because usually, like, I want to make sure that I'm getting the education, like the best education I could possibly get, so I can pass it on to my students. So I think meeting the professors and getting to talk to them and ask about the program, that was a really big part for me. So that's why I chose ITEP.
We take great pride in our professors and in the work that they're doing. And viewers of our podcast or listeners to our podcast would know all about how excellent they all are. Dr. Van Boxtel, in designing the celebration of teaching, what were you trying to achieve?
I think a few goals. Number one, just getting the word out about the opportunity. It was a new program for Cal Poly. Allison's a member of our first cohort for this fall. So that was a real focus, just letting our district partners know about this opportunity. But through the celebration of teaching event itself, there was, as Allison said, more of an opportunity to hear from teachers. We had a panel of various speakers, teachers, other students. We had a student with a disability who talked about her experience going through K-12 and being in inclusive programming and how that has really benefited her as a young adult. So those stories, I think, could give more of a personal insight to the field. And then they also had an opportunity in table discussions to ask more of the questions they might be wondering about as far as logistics or even just some of the day-to-day responsibilities of teachers. So I think that was another highlight of being able to attend this event. So letting students know about the opportunity, letting them get more of a holistic picture of what it's like to teach, because we know that some of the messages about teaching can be negative that are out in the world. And so this was a chance to also really highlight some of the real benefits and joys that, the rewards of teaching, personal, professional, emotional, spiritual, but then financial. We actually don't often hear about the fact that this is a really solid career path with really strong benefits and, just something where you have an opportunity to make a difference in the lives of the students that you're impacting and teaching on a day-to-day basis and make a solid income from that too.
So, and the sponsor of this event was the College of Education, but we were using funds from the state?
So we used some of our state funding through the grant to put the event together. We also partnered with EduCorps, which is an outreach from the Chancellor's Office of Cal State University Systems, and their whole focus is to help all of the CSU campuses to recruit and attract students into the field, because they're also mindful of the teacher shortage that's facing our state right now.
So were you aware of a teacher shortage or an impending teacher shortage at all?
No, not when I first found out about the program, I was not aware.
But you have worked with children with disabilities, as you were mentioning, at your high school. Yes. What was the nature of that work? How often did you go, and what did you do when you were there?
So when I was in high school, I was in a part of a club called Best Buddies. And every single day I did some type of work for Best Buddies, whether it's administration or hanging out with my the buddies. So Best Buddies is a program where we take special education students and general education students, so people with disabilities and people without disabilities, and we create friendships between them. So we'll have meetings at school and we'll match them with a friend. So we'll match someone with a disability and without. And we give them spaces to interact. We give them activities. And so throughout my whole high school, we were planning different activities for lunches, and we expected the members who signed up to interact with their buddies outside of school. So whether it's to go get donuts in the morning or to hang out at the park after school, or we just wanted to create those connections and start a more inclusive environment at school. And it really worked, because when I'm in the hallway, I see the gen ed students giving high fives to the special education students, and it was really great to see the impact that it had on the school.
So you made friends.
Yes.
And you learned about people with disabilities.
Yes.
And they made friends, and they're often, as you mentioned, segregated. So this was an opportunity for them to explore their social networks and expand their social networks.
Yes, definitely.
And what did you learn about disabilities from those interactions?
I learned more about the disability community, because I was matched with someone with a disability, and he has autism, and he changed my world. Like, he was like a really close friend, and like when I was having a bad day, he'd always smile, and he was always there for me. And just learning how he has his own like whole personality. And that club also taught me like they're individual people. Like they have things they love, they have things they hate, they have all different types of personalities. You know, like a lot of people think of someone with a disability and they don't associate with the person themselves. And so it's getting to know those people for who they are and not for their disability.
Okay. So what did you learn about autism?
It doesn't define the person. So I learned that Bradley's my buddy, he had certain quirks, but that didn't stop him from doing anything. He went out and he worked, I think he had 3 jobs so far, and he hasn't even graduated high school. He's worked as and he worked at Hometown Buffet, he worked at TJ Maxx, he was babysitting. Like, yes, he had autism. He was so successful. Like, he was going out and always reaching for higher goals. And I learned that like your disability doesn't define you.
So that's why we have the concept in the field called people first.
Yes.
Why don't you tell us about that?
So people first language is a sort of way to communicate with when you're talking about people with disabilities. And so you would use words instead of like, for an example, like let's say Bradley, instead of saying, oh, Bradley has autism and he's wearing the green hat, you would say, oh, Bradley's wearing the green hat and he has autism, you know, or he was diagnosed with autism. So you recognize the person before the disability.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and I see that we have a chart on the screen. So why don't you tell us about that chart?
Yeah, so this chart just gives a few examples of things to say when recognizing someone with a disability. So you would say, instead of like handicap parking, you would say accessible parking. Instead of saying, oh, he's autistic, you would say he has autism or he was diagnosed with autism. So it's just kind of being respectful to the community and being aware.
Well, some people would say that's political correctness or some other derogatory, well, it's not supposed to be a derogatory term, but it's become one in some vernacular. How do you respond to that? Is that, are we just playing with words?
I feel like, no, because I feel like in certain cases, it's the people who made the word like that. So we're trying to change the light of people with disabilities. So we're trying to have a movement of seeing them in a new light, seeing them for the individual and not for their disability. So I feel like changing like the words that we use is one step to that process. So
Dr. Van Boxtel, where is the field in terms of people first language, and what are some of the latest research findings about the use of those kinds of language?
Person first language is something that I would say as a field, have trained our candidates on for many years. It's really kind of a central tenet of thinking about inclusive education. Where the field, I think, has evolved even further, though, is in the area of disability studies. So like we have ethnic and women's studies programs. We also can look at disability as a community and the contributions of individuals with disabilities. Looking at disability history as a field, the way individuals with disabilities were treated within our own country prior to IDEA law that has given us what we have today with inclusive education. So we've come out of some dark times as far as our treatment of individuals with disabilities, even globally. So I would say the research that is really focused on unpacking that and kind of highlighting the contributions of individuals with disabilities and looking at disability more holistically as a community, like Allison said, would be the field of disability studies. So that's more of an emerging research area, maybe in the last 10, 20 years or so.
So where do you see it going? What are the next hurdles in terms of addressing the needs of people with disabilities?
I think one of the things that's happening within our state for teacher preparation particularly is a focus on more inclusive preparation. The state is really looking at the mantra now is like one system, the whole child. So looking at one system and the whole child. So when we're thinking about K-12 settings, we're thinking about students more holistically. We focus on academic needs, but we're also thinking about mental, emotional, behavioral, and we can think about the supports that we have to help students reach their potential in all areas, not just academics. So in that sense, in teacher preparation, there is also a focus on kind of an integrated approach to teacher preparation, where there's more of a focus on inclusive preparation for general education and special education teacher candidates. Right now we're still in a system where we have two authorizations. They're separate, but we are working kind of within, I guess, from the ground up through the preparation programs to start making those bridges between the preparation experience of general education candidates and special education teacher candidates. So general education and special education teachers are working together to meet the needs of all of the students and kind of moving away from more of the segregated programming. So
when I first became a teacher, I had students who were identified as having learning disabilities, and I didn't have the first idea how to address their needs. And fortunately, I had a special ed colleague who would come into my classroom and would explain things to me and guide me in designing activities and assignments. But now teachers are better prepared for welcoming and meeting the needs of children with disabilities.
Yes, one of the ways we're doing that is through the standards of teacher preparation, and those have actually just been revised within our state. So the ed specialist standards are in the process of being revised. We have new teacher performance expectations for ed specialists. We have fairly new teacher performance expectations for general education teacher candidates, and the common thread between them is universal design for learning strategies, which are it's basically looking at the way that you plan your instruction to meet the needs of students when you sit down to do your planning versus planning your lesson and kind of adding on your adaptations based on the needs of your students after the fact, in a nutshell. So universal design for learning, and then multi-tiered systems of support, which the MTSS is the acronym for that. And that is where you're looking at the system and supports within the school setting in a more holistic manner. So behavioral supports, social emotional supports, academic supports, and bringing all that together to serve all students.
So in the old days, we had this idea of teaching as teaching everybody the same thing at the same time. Everybody had the identical assignments, and children who had some kind of learning challenges would struggle. But now we're not doing it that way. And I guess you've had some experience in tutoring children with disabilities, your fellow students.
Yes.
What were some of the things that you discovered?
I discovered that you can't keep pushing the same exact way. So, for example, if they are not getting it one way, kind of think outside the box and try to approach it a different way.
You mean you don't do the same thing, only louder?
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, that's true. So I try to approach it from a different way, and also the repetitiveness helps, and just to be patient with the repetitiveness, because that's how they learn.
Okay, but someone would say, well, that interferes with the management of the class, and that we have some students who are taking more time. How do you respond to that?
Well, that happens in general education classes too. There's always that one student who gets left behind. So I think maybe having like aides like help in directly, or extra tutoring outside of class, but having them in that class is so important, because they could always get the extra help outside of class. So the teacher doesn't have to necessarily stop for them, but they can get extra help additionally on the side.
And that was the kind of thing that you did?
Yes.
Okay, so what were some of your success stories? I know you worked with that young man. Did you work with other students as part of your high school?
Yeah, when I was in middle school, I volunteered as a teacher's aide. So I was an aide for the entire summer. And that was a really rewarding experience. I got to experience like teaching firsthand. And the teacher actually let me teach a lesson. And the first time it was very, very difficult. I had never taught before. But after I learned to engage with the students and I learned to explain it in a different way where they would understand, and to ask questions so I could explain it for a different way for someone who didn't get it the first time.
And then they were more successful in school, and they felt
Yes.
better about themselves, and all those good things followed. Has there been sufficient support for the needs of students with disabilities in K-12, P-12 programs?
Sufficient supports, I would say the supports would be more in that, historically more in that segregated approach, whereas the students are pulled out of the gen ed setting to get the interventions and supports that they need. And so now we're moving to a place with our approach with early intervention, targeted instruction through universal design for learning. The more that teachers are aware of some of the strategies that have an effect on learning and some of the ways that we can make learning more accessible. Technology is really an asset for that, for meeting lots of needs. I know with the kids with autism, sometimes there are a lot of platforms that really help with their communication. So they may have some kind of application that will speak for them through pictures. And so that really kind of takes care of some of the barriers that would have necessitated more specialized support and intervention outside of the gen ed setting. So I think that'll be.
But we could probably benefit from more investment in special education and preparing teachers to teach in that field.
Yes, absolutely. And I think also being strategic about the way that we look at supports. So co-teaching is one way that I know schools are being inclusive, where gen ed and special ed teachers are working in the same classroom. So the students that do need the supports as defined on their IEPs, their individualized education plans, they are getting those supports from the special education teacher and the general education teacher through the lessons. But both those teachers are there to kind of make the learning experience more accessible for all kids. So.
And then all the children in the class benefit from having a diverse classroom and learning more about the differences between and among themselves.
Yeah.
So that's a big plus too.
Mm-hmm.
So as we finish up, Allison, what advice would you have for someone who's contemplating entering the field and particularly coming to Cal Poly Pomona?
I would recommend that they reach out to some of the professors. They try to immerse themselves in the field in any way they can, immerse themselves in the community, so they can either try volunteer work at event for people who are diagnosed with autism, try to immerse themselves in that environment to see if it's right for them, and to see if Cal Poly is the right fit. I would definitely reach out to professors like Dr. Van Boxtel, and try to immerse yourself as best you can to see if that's the right fit for you.
And if somebody wanted to contact you and learn more about the ITEP program, how would they go about that?
Email's probably the easiest, jmvanboxtel@cpp.edu. We also have a website for ITEP. If you just plug in ITEP into our search bar for CPP, it'll pop up. We have frequently asked questions about the program there. We have our application materials and the process is defined on there as well. And then just some of the benefits we've highlighted about the program and what makes it different than the standard preparation route.
Well, I have to say that I'm inspired by the quality of your program and also by the potential and the commitment that you've expressed. I think we're in good shape for the future. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
You.